Following on from my previous video where we had a look at the 5 mono-coloured jump-in packs from Phyrexia All Will Be One, today we're looking at the 5 dual-colour packs, and there's some really good ones in this. Welcome back to Game School Dad with me, Martin. Today we're looking at the other 5 jump-in packs from Phyrexia All Will Be One. Let's have a quick look through those 5 different packs. The first one that we're going to have a look at today is the Virulent pack, which is the black and green one. And you may have noticed straight away the rare we get in this pack, which most people are going to be either really excited about or slightly annoyed by. We can get the Venerated Rotpriest, that card that everyone loves right now, for the jump-in pack, which is really great. It's a 1 mana 1/2 toxic 1, which doesn't sound very exciting by itself, but whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. So whenever you target the Rotpriest or any other creature that you control, the opponent gets a poison counter, and whenever they target the Rotpriest, they get a poison counter. So if they try to cut down and you put protection on it, that's 2 poison counters for the opponent. So it's great in other constructed decks, but what does it have here in the jump-in pack? Well, we have the Bilious Skulldweller, a 1/1 for 1 mana, which is a Death Touch Toxic 1. So Death Touch, it's nice, I guess you get to attack. The opponent doesn't want to lose their creature, so they let the damage come through. They get a toxic counter on the opponent. The Venerated Rotpriest also can give toxic directly by attacking, not just with the whole when a creature becomes a target of a spell. You could also just attack with the Rotpriest and do toxic damage that way, or give them a poison counter that way. There's Necrogen Communion, a 2 mana aura. Enchant a creature you control and give it toxic 2. When that creature dies, you can return it to the battlefield under your control. So if you want to protect your Rotpriest, put Necrogen Communion on there as well. Giving it toxic 2, because it already has toxic 1, we'll give it toxic 3. So it's going to do 3 poison counters every time it hits the opponent, which is really great. They only need 10 to lose the game, so doing 3 there and more when they target the Rotpriest is amazing. The next card is Pestilent Syphoner, a flying 1/1 with toxic 1 as well. So the whole deck obviously is working on toxic synergies. It's trying to kill the opponent with poison rather than with damage. Then we have a Branchblight Stalker, a 2 mana 3/1 toxic 2 Phyrexian Elf Scout. So again, a great way of getting toxic damage or poison counters onto your opponent. Then we have Stinging Hivemaster, a 3 mana 3/2 toxic 1. When it dies, you create a 1/1 colorless might with toxic 1 as well. I've used this one a lot in limited, and it's really great because even if the opponent kills it, you still get a creature with toxic. And for the opponent to kill it, if they're targeting it with a spell, Rotpriest will put a poison counter on them anyway. So they're getting lots of poison. In fact, every single thing so far has toxic or gives toxic. And our next one is Vraska's Fall. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and they get a poison counter. So again, everything so far is poison. We have Mazes Mantle, a 3 mana aura flash. Enchant a creature. When it enters the battlefield, if the creature has toxic, and they all do, that creature gains hexproof till end of turn and gets +2/+2. So this is a great protection spell for the Rotpriest. If the opponent tries to kill it, they get a poison counter. You put Mazes Mantle on top of the Rotpriest, and by targeting it with the aura, you get another poison counter on the opponent. And to top it off, Rotpriest gets hexproof and doesn't die, and gets +2/+2. So all in all, lots going on there basically. Okay, and then we have Plague Nurse, a 4 mana 3/4 Phyrexian Cleric with toxic 2 and the ability to pay 3 mana. Each other creature you control with toxic gains toxic 1 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn, so you can attack with all your creatures and boost that toxic value up 1. Rather than toxic 1, it's toxic 2. Rather than toxic 2, it's toxic 3. So lots more poison counters going around, and that's before we even get to Necrogen Rotpriest, a 4 mana 1/5 toxic 2, which is good in itself. But whenever a creature you control with toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets an additional poison counter. So everything here is adding poison counters, adding extra poison counters, and to top it off, there's a 3 mana ability here. Target creature you control with toxic gains Death Touch until end of turn. So we already have one with Death Touch. But anything else attacking, even if it's that 1/1 might that can't block, you can give that Death Touch. So Necrogen Rotpriest in limited, this one's been a real pain. I haven't used it myself, but it's been used against me pretty well a few times. So that's a really good uncommon. And the last card we have here is Nimraiser Paladin, a 5 mana Toxic 2 4/4. When Nimraiser Paladin enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. What do we have apart from Plague Nurse and Necrogen Rotpriest? The other creatures here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of those creatures have mana value 3 or less. So if the opponent's killed any of them, we can bring them back again. So I really like the Virulent jump-in pack. I think all the toxic counters work really well. If you happen to pick this up in a jump-in event and you get the other green pack with it, the Venom pack, you're going to have so much toxic going on, so many creatures. I think it's going to work really well, although the chances of you picking those two, I guess, are pretty small. But either way, you get these cards. They're going to work pretty well in a constructed deck as well. Necrogen Rotpriest is going to work really well with Venerated Rotpriest. No surprise there, because they're both Rotpriests. So if you put these together in a constructed deck with some other protection spells, other ways of removing the opponent's creatures, you're going to basically kill them with poison counters before you deal too much damage. So there's one way to win with poison counters, which is really exciting because they're new. Not new, but they're new in Phyrexia. They're new to some people. So we're starting off with a really strong one, Venerated Rotpriest. And the alternative rare you can get in the Virulent pack, as far as I know, because I haven't got it myself, is Glisser Sunslayer, which is another really great creature, a 3 mana, 3/3 with First Strike and Death Touch. And whenever you have First Strike and Death Touch, it's a really good creature. But also, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can either draw a card and lose a life, destroy a target enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. So if you have spare life, an extra card is really great. If the opponent's used Ossification or some kind of borrowed time effect on your creature, destroy their enchantment, destroy their wedding announcement, whatever enchantments they have, you can get rid of those every time. Obviously there's enchantment creatures as well. Or you could pick to remove 3 counters from target permanent, and those 3 counters could be any type of counter that there is, oil counters, or possibly even loyalty counters from a Planeswalker. So that's really great. Glisser Sunslayer. Is it better than Rotpriest? I don't know. They're both great. They're different. But either way, if you're getting Glisser or you're getting Venerated Rotpriest, the Virulent deck is a really, really strong one to pick. The next pack we're looking at is the blue and green pack called Contagion. And in this pack, we have all kinds of, well, we have toxic, we have poison counters, but we also have proliferate mechanics as well, because we have Azuri, Stalker of Spheres, a 4 mana 3/3 legendary creature. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 3, and if you do, you can proliferate twice, and whenever you proliferate, you draw a card. So for 4 mana, you put out your 3/3. If you have another 3 mana, you can proliferate twice, which is drawing 2 other cards as well. So whether there are counters on things or not, you can still proliferate, even if you don't have any counters to add. So you can still draw 2 cards for 3 mana when this comes out. So let's have a look at the other cards in this pack. We have Glistener Seer, a 1 mana 0/3 creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, or it does enter the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it, and you can remove an oil counter to scry 1. So it's limited because it only has 3 oil counters, but if we're proliferating, we can add oil counters on and keep powering up that scry 1, so we can keep scrying over and over again. We have Evolving Adaptive, a 1 mana 0/0 creature. It enters with an oil counter on it and gets +1/+1 for each oil counter it has. Whenever another creature enters under your control, if it has greater power or toughness than Evolving Adaptive, you put an oil counter on Evolving Adaptive, and Evolving Adaptive grows. Obviously, it grows with Proliferate as well because you're adding oil counters that way. So a nice small creature that grows, which we get quite a lot in green decks. Quite like Evolving Adaptive, and it's nice to see how that might be used in other decks as well. Then we have Thrumming Bird. Now this, as far as I'm aware, is the only way to reliably or repeatedly proliferate. It's a 1/1, 2 mana flying creature. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you proliferate. So instead of just being a sorcery or instant, or whenever it enters you may proliferate, the Thrumming Bird can proliferate in theory every turn as long as it hits, but it's flying so it's kind of evasive. So if we have a Glistener Seer, we have an Evolving Adaptive, every time a Thrumming Bird does damage to the opponent, they're both gaining oil counters, they're growing, or they're gaining more scries for the future. So Thrumming Bird's a really cool creature. Then we have Predation Steward, a 2-mana 2/2. It enters with 2 oil counters on it, and you can pay 3 mana and tap it to remove an oil counter, and a target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So it's a nice ability, but if you're not careful you can use up your last oil counter. If you have no oil counters left on Predation Steward, then you can't add another one. It needs to have at least 1 oil counter on it for the proliferating to add another one. But still, for a common, not too bad. Then we've got Ruthless Predation, a 2-mana sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 and fights a creature you don't control. So pretty standard for green to have a fight spell that is your form of removal. Then we have Titanic Growth, a 2-mana instant. Target creature gets +4/+4 till end of turn, which is pretty standard. Then we have Mesmerizing Dose, a 3-mana aura. You enchant a creature, an opponent's creature, and it taps the creature and then you proliferate and the creature cannot untap. So again, adding oil counters onto Predation Steward, Glistener Seer, Evolving Adaptive. So as long as you have a use for the proliferate, really good. Then we have a Contagious Vorak, a 3-mana 3/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal a land card from among them and put it into your hand. And if you don't put a card into your hand, that way you proliferate. So if you have a need for proliferating, if you have an Evolving Adaptive out, then that makes sense. If you don't have anything that needs proliferating, you might as well take that land and put it into your hand as well. Then we have Tainted Observer, a 3-mana 2/3 flying toxic 1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 if you do proliferate. So this works better when we have lots of other creatures entering. It's toxic, and there's nothing else that we've had so far that actually uses toxic. In fact, this is the only creature in the deck that uses toxic. So you're probably not going to be killing the opponent with poison counters, because even if you do toxic and you proliferate lots of times, it's still going to take so much proliferating to get to 10 poison counters. You probably would have killed them with combat damage anyway. So this card might not work so well in this deck without other toxic creatures, but a 2/3 flyer for 3 mana with toxic 1 that has the ability to proliferate every turn, every time a creature comes out, might work really well in another constructed deck that's working specifically on poison counters. Watchful Blisterzoa, a 6-mana 4/4 flying. It enters with an oil counter on it, and whenever it dies you draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it. So we proliferate a few times, it gets a few oil counters. Maybe it dies with 3 oil counters on it. We're drawing 3 cards. That's not too bad. Again, it's better if we have more ways of adding oil counters or proliferating. We have some ways and that's pretty good, but I guess it would be better if we had other ways. So all in all, not a bad deck to pick up from the jump-in event. And the alternative rare or mythic you can get in this pack is Akuthal Inquiry Dominus, 4-mana 3/5 flying. If you would proliferate twice instead. So instead of getting Azuri, which is nice, if we had Akuthal, this will work even better because creatures come in, we're proliferating twice. Contagious Vorak comes in, we could proliferate twice. Every time Thrumming Bird hits, we could proliferate twice. Evolving Adaptive would be growing. We'd be adding oil counters onto Predation Steward, so we can keep using its +2/+2 ability. And we can add lots of oil counters onto Watchful Blisterzoa, so the opponent doesn't want to kill it, because if they do, we're going to draw so many cards. We also have the ability to pay 3 mana or 1 mana and 4 life, and you remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control, put an indestructible counter on it. So maybe you have some extra oil counters you don't need on Glistener Sphere, or Predation Steward you're not too worried about. You can make it indestructible if the opponent's trying to kill it. So that's the Contagion deck, which is, again, not too bad. I quite like these 2 color ones. Let's move on to the next one. The next deck we're looking at is the Synthesized deck, which is the red and blue pack. And I've got actually both the rares here because it might be easier to look at them both straight away. We have, where's it gone? There it is. Mercurial Spelldancer, a 2-mana 2/1 Phyrexian rogue. It can't be blocked. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on it. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters. And if you do, you can cast your next instant or sorcery and copy it. So potentially a really good card to use if you have some powerful instants or sorceries and you want to copy those. Then yes, definitely go with Mercurial Spelldancer. But the alternative rare we have in the pack is Ovica Enigma Goliath, which is on the other end of the scale, a really big creature, a 7-mana 6/6 flying, ward 3, 3 mana and pay 3 life for the opponent, so quite hard for them to get rid of. Also, they don't really want to because they have to use up extra mana and pay the life. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create X 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creatures, where X is the mana value of that spell. So if we can cast really big spells, then Enigma Goliath is going to create loads of goblins for us. What I like about this one is whenever you cast a spell, you make X goblins, where X is the mana value of the spell. It doesn't say the mana that you cost, that it cost you to cast a spell. So sometimes you might have an enchantment or an ability that allows you to cast a spell for free. If you can, then you still create X goblins for the mana value of the actual spell, not what you needed to use to cast it. So a great way to cheat out lots and lots of goblins. So it's a pretty good rare. Flying 6/6 is evasive. It's going to do really well in jumping events. Let's have a look at all the other cards in this pack. We have Free from Flesh, a 1-mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and put 2 oil counters on it. So a great one to power up Mercurial Spelldancer if you have that in your deck. We have Sawblade Scamp, a 1-mana 1/1 haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. And you can tap it to remove an oil counter and do 1 damage to each opponent, which is a great little creature for getting out, doing some damage at the beginning. But also, if you can't attack with it because the opponent has a bigger blocker, you can still use it, tap it, and do damage to the opponent. So this might work in some kind of red aggro deck as well, possibly. Next, we have the Ichor Synthesizer, 2-mana 1/3. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. And as long as it has 4 or more oil counters, it gets +2/+0 and it can't be blocked. It becomes a 3/3 unblockable creature as long as it has 4 or more oil counters. How can we get those? Well, Free from Flesh is a good way to start. We could also proliferate and add oil counters. It doesn't start with 1 oil counter, so we have to do something. We have to cast a non-creature spell first for it to get the oil counter on it first. But if we cast a non-creature spell that proliferates, we can add another oil counter and then proliferate and add another one. So it could start to snowball, it could start to build up those oil counters pretty quickly, possibly. We have Serum Snare, a 2-mana instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if it had mana value 3 or less, you proliferate. So adding more oil counters onto our Sawblade Scamp or our Ichor Synthesizer or our Mercurial Spelldancer. We have Trawler Drake, a 3-mana 0/0 because, and it's a flyer, 0/0 because it enters with an oil counter and gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. So Free from Flesh, add 2 oil counters. It suddenly has basically 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put another oil counter on it as well. So this Trawler Drake is going to keep growing pretty quickly whenever we cast non-creature spells, especially when we cast non-creature spells that also proliferate. And we've got Vault Charge, a 3-mana, 3 damage to any target and proliferate, which is a good spell in itself, especially if we have these creatures out with the oil counters on them as well. Or if we can use Mercurial Spelldancer to copy that, and then we're doing 3 damage and proliferating twice. So this all works together really well so far. We have Tamiyo's Immobilizer, a 4-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, it has 4 oil counters on it already. You can tap it to remove an oil counter to tap target artifact or creature. So you can disable an opponent's creature. There's only 4 oil counters on it, so you only get 4 uses unless we're proliferating and adding more oil counters onto it that way. So it could run out pretty quickly if we don't have enough ways to proliferate. Then we have Volshock Splitter, a 4-mana artifact for Mirrodin. When it enters, it creates a 2/2 rebel. Basically, it becomes a 4/2 creature. And then if the token rebel dies, you still have the artifact to equip onto something else. Then we have the Serum Core Chimera, 4-mana 2/4 flyer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on the creature. You can remove 3 oil counters to draw a card and then discard a non-land card. When you discard a card that way, it deals 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker and you activate it as a sorcery. And then we have 5 mana sorcery, draw 3 cards and proliferate. What I like about this one most is if we have Overcut Enigma Goliath, we can cast Vivisurgent's Insight to draw 3 cards, proliferate and create 5 1/1 goblin creatures. So that's the blue and red pack. Let me know what you think and let's move on to the next one. The next one here is the red and white pack, the equipment focused deck called Hexgold, and the rare I got in this one was Jor Kadeen First Gold Warden, a human rebel, 2 mana, 2/2 with trample. Whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of equipped creatures you control. Its power is 4 or greater, draw a card. So we just need to have 2 equipped creatures for it to draw a card whenever it attacks as a 4/4 trample, which for 2 mana is not too bad. So as long as we have lots of equipment cards here in this deck, this will work out pretty well. If it happens to not have too many, then its ability won't get used very reliably. Maybe if you're using a jump-in deck and you pick another one that happens to have other equipment cards, then this could really work out. And the alternative rare or mythic we can get in this pack, which I didn't get myself, but I've seen that you can get it, is Nahiri the Unforgiving, the 4 mana planeswalker, which you can +1 to cause a target creature to attack each combat if it's able, or discard a card and draw a card, or you can exile a creature or equipment card with mana value less than its loyalty. You create a token copy of the creature or equipment card, and the token gains haste and you have to exile at the beginning of the next end step. So that's the mythic planeswalker you can get in the Hexgold pack. Let's have a look at the other cards in this pack. We have Hexgold / a 1 mana, 2 damage to target creature or 4 damage if that creature has toxic. Now everyone's loving toxic creatures at the moment, so being able to do more damage to a toxic creature is pretty nice, especially considering there's some 4/4 green toxic creatures out there. So this is a great way to get rid of some of those. We have Hexgold Halberd, a 2 mana equipment that will give your creature first strike and trample. So starts out as a 2/2 first strike trample, but put it on a bigger creature or put it on Jor Kadeen to give him first strike as well. And then we have Leonin Lightbringer, 3 mana, 3/2 with Ward 2. Whenever it's equipped, it gets an extra +1/+1. So Hexgold Halberd would work really nice. On the Lightbringer, it would be a 4/3 first strike trample for 3 mana, not too bad. Then we've got Bladegraft Aspirant, 3 mana, 2/3 menace. Equipment spells cost 1 less to cast, and activated abilities cost 1 less to activate if they target the Bladegraft Aspirant. So we can attach more equipment onto this much easier. And it starts out as a 2/3 menace, which is nice, but we can add first strike, we can add trample, we can add additional power or toughness to it with the other equipments that we have. We've got Rebel Salvo, a 3 mana, 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and it loses indestructible till end of turn. So this destroys things even if they're indestructible. And we also have affinity for equipment, so it costs 1 less for each equipment you control. Now for 3 mana, being able to destroy an indestructible creature that has 5 toughness is pretty good anyway, but being able to cast it for even less when we have other equipment out, really, really nice uncommon card. Then we have Bladehold Warwhip, a 3 mana artifact equipment that comes out as a double striking 2/2, but also equip abilities you activate for other equipment cost 1 less to activate. So it's much easier to move your equipment around and attach it to different creatures as you need it. So that works really well in other decks that obviously have a lot more equipment as well. Then we have Against All Odds, 4 mana sorcery. You can choose one or both of these options. You can exile an artifact or creature you control and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So you basically can take an equipment and place it back out and create another token. Or you can return an artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And we have a lot of things here that have mana value 3 or less, and it comes straight out to the battlefield, which is really nice as well, rather than going to your hand and having to recast it. Then we've got Hexgold Hoverwings, a 4 mana. Equip a creature, give it flying, and +1 to its power as well. So it comes out as a 3/2 flyer for 4 mana, which is not too bad, especially considering you can equip that +1 and flying onto other creatures as well. Then we have Mirin Bardiche, a 5 mana equipment that gives your creature +2/+1 and vigilance as well. So it comes out as a 4/3 vigilant creature. It's quite nice to see how all these different artifacts, the equipments, have very different abilities. We have vigilance, we have flying, we have first strike, we have trample. If we equip them onto Bladegraft, we also have menace as well. So a huge mix of different keywords we can play with in the Hexgold deck there. And we also have the 5 mana 5/5 menace reach resistance Skywarden. Deal with those flying creatures that your opponent has, and a really good creature to start equipping your first strike and trample on, for instance. So that's everything in the Hexgold pack. Let me know what you think of this one. I think it's pretty good as long as you have the mana you need to start moving your equipment around and making the most of that. Then it's not a bad deck at all. But let me know what you think. Let's move on to the next one. And finally, we have the black and white deck, which is Corrupted. A deck that works on not just poison counters, but once you have 3 poison counters, you enable Corrupted, and your creatures and your other permanents have extra abilities as long as your opponent has those 3 poison counters. So unlike the green decks, we're not necessarily trying to kill the opponent with the poison counters, but we just want to get those 3 to enable the other abilities we have here. And the rare we have in this pack, or the rare that I got in this pack, is Rhea Ivor, Bane of Bladehold, a 4 mana 3/4 Phyrexian Knight with the ability Battle Cry, which says here Battle Cry, whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 till end of turn, which is really good, especially when we have those 1/1 toxic creatures that become 2/1s. So the opponent really wants to block those, otherwise it's taking lots of damage if we have lots of mites. It also has this big block of text that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, the next time target creature would deal combat damage to one or more players this combat, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, create that many 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1 and they can't block. So with this creature itself, it's going to attack. We could say, so instead of doing our 3 combat damage, we're going to make 3 mites. Possibly we might want to do this if the opponent has too much life and they're quite close to dying with poison counters and we just need to make some more creatures. Maybe we have other synergies for when creatures enter the battlefield and we want to create more things that enter. So it's an interesting ability. I haven't had to use it myself yet. I wonder how we could best use that ability. The other alternative rare card we could get in this pack is Skrelv's Hive, 2 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you create a 1/1 might with Toxic 1. But even more exciting, if you have Corrupted, if the opponent has 3 poison counters, your creatures with Toxic have lifelink as well. So at the very least, we're making a 1/1 lifelink Toxic 1 creature every turn if we have Corrupted enabled. We're losing life, but we're gaining a 1/1 lifelink creature, so we're going to attack with that anyway and gain that life back. So nice way to keep making 1/1 creatures and possibly maybe even kill the opponent with the poison counters, even though we're mostly just trying to get to those 3 to enable Corrupted. Maybe that's another way we could win if we do get enough poison counters through. So let's have a look at the other cards in this pack. We have Crawling Chorus, a 1 mana 1/1 with Toxic 1. When it dies, you replace it with another creature, a might. We have Zealot's Conviction, a 1 mana aura with flash, so you can use it at instant speed. And you give the enchanted creature +1/+1, but if the opponent has Corrupted, if they have 3 poison counters, you also get an extra +1 and first strike. So it basically becomes a +2/+1 first strike flash that stays on the creature. So it's a really good enchantment to have, especially if you want your creatures to get first strike. If you have a big, strong creature, then first strike and an extra +2/+1 works out pretty well on that. Then we have Duelist of Deep Faith, a 2 mana 2/2 Toxic 1. If it's your turn, it has first strike. So quite often the opponent might not want to block this because a 2/2 first strike will probably destroy one of their creatures they block with, unless it's later on and they have bigger creatures. So it can get some toxic damage through in the early game, which is what we need if we want Corrupted to work for us. Then we have Anoint with Affliction, a 2 mana instant. Exile target creature mana value 3 or less. Or if we have Corrupted, we can exile any creature with it, which is pretty good for 2 mana. Then we have Flensing Raptor, a 3 mana 2/2 flying Toxic 1. When it enters the battlefield, another creature you control with Toxic gets +1/+1 and gains flying. Don't have a huge amount of creatures with toxic, but obviously we might be making mites as well. So not too bad to give something basically a +1/+1 and flying. Then we have Vanish into Eternity, a 3 mana instant to exile target non-land permanent, but it costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature. So a 6 mana exile a creature. I haven't seen this used very much, but I guess if the opponent has other artifacts or enchantments or planeswalkers that are causing a big problem, maybe that's why it's here, because there's 10 new planeswalkers in the set, so maybe it's there intentionally to get rid of planeswalkers instead. 6 mana to exile a creature seems pretty expensive, so I guess you wouldn't use it for that at all. Then we have a 3 mana Chittering Skittling, a 1/4 Phyrexian rat, which can't do anything extra until we have Corrupted, but when we do, you can sacrifice an artifact or creature and draw a card. So maybe if we have Skrelv's Hive and we're making a might every turn, we could sacrifice that and turn it into drawing a card every turn. Then we've got Stinging Hivemaster, that toxic one, 3/2 creature. When it dies, it replaces itself with a 1/1 might. We had this in the other one as well. Then we have Ravenous Necro Titan. This one's worked really well for me in my Premier Draft games. 4 mana for a 6/6. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice another creature if they don't have Corrupted, if the opponent doesn't have the 3 poison counters. But if they do have the 3 poison counters, you're just casting a 6/6 for 4 mana, which is really nice. But also in a deck like this, you're probably going to have something like the Crawling Chorus or a Might creature that you don't mind sacrificing anyway. So as long as it's something small and you just get rid of it, a 4 mana 6/6 is a very nice creature to get out, especially in limited. And then at the top end we have Vivisection Evangelist, a 5 mana 4/4 with Vigilance, and if we have Corrupted, when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy a creature or planeswalker the opponent controls. So 5 mana to remove a creature or planeswalker and get a 4/4 Vigilance is pretty good, but we really do want to have Corrupted. If we don't have Corrupted and you're casting a 5 mana 4/4 with Vigilance, it's okay, but it's much better if we can destroy something at the same time. So that's the Corrupted deck. Obviously, completely around the Corrupted mechanic, we want to get 3 poison counters, and then all these creatures can do extra things, which is really nice. So you probably won't kill the opponent with the poison counters, but you will get all these extra things from the Corrupted mechanic. So that's the 5 remaining jump-in packs. I haven't seen online anywhere else, but I can guarantee they're going to be put up on the Wizards of the Coast website pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any other potential cards that you could get in the packs that I didn't manage to get or other people didn't manage to get. So we'll see if that gets announced very soon. But in the meantime, let me know which of these 5 packs you think is the best one we could use in Jump In, or which one is the best to pick up just for getting those rares and uncommons that you can use in your other constructed decks. So if you're doing your Jump In events, look out for those ones because you want to get those newest cards with your Jump In events if possible. And don't forget, you can like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. Thanks for watching this one to the end, and I will see you in the next video.